Lesson 18. Does Jesus care about my pain? Well, of course he does. But it's not such a simple answer, because the pain that most of us focus on is the physical pain of our bodies, maybe some emotional pain as well. But Jesus is concerned about a far deeper pain that we experience. It's the sin sickness. And so as we continue to look at miracles, instead of just looking at the miracles that make you say, wow, we're going to look at signs that make you say, oh, because they point to something. So let's take a look at one of Jesus' healing miracles that took place on a Sabbath. He had just come out of the synagogue, preaching in the synagogue, and a demon manifested itself. And Jesus cast the demon out, yes, on the Sabbath. Yes, it causes problems. After the synagogue service is over, they go not too far, right to Peter's house. If you've been to Capernaum, or Capernaum is how we typically pronounce it, you've probably seen both the synagogue, that is a 5th century synagogue built on the very one that Jesus preached in, and then you've probably seen Peter's house. The big Catholic church is built over it today. Kind of looks like a spaceship. Below is this octagonal home that looks like it was Peter's. That won't get into the architectural or archaeological details right now, but it seems to me that is Peter's house. So he's not far. And when he goes to Peter's house, Peter's mother-in-law, yes, he was married, was sick with fever. Actually, the Greek word is fevers. It looks something like malaria. Verse 29. And immediately he left the synagogue and entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Peter's mother-in-law is deathly ill. It looks like she might have malaria because the Greek word is not fever, but fevers. And Matthew and Mark only focus on the fact that Jesus touched her, bringing healing. But Luke introduces a really interesting thought. Luke 4, verse 39. And he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. And immediately she rose and began to serve them. When it says that Jesus rebuked the fever, that's the same word that was used earlier for casting out the demon, rebuking the demon. It is as if the physical sickness and the spiritual sickness go hand in hand. I'm not saying that all physical sickness is caused by demons or some spiritual warfare. I am saying, though, that Jesus is deliberately showing the connection between our bodies and our spiritual sickness. And the greater sickness he's concerned about is the sin sickness that goes way deeper and has way longer consequences than a physical sickness. The other thing interesting to me is that Peter's mother-in-law, once she's healed, gets up and serves them. That seems to be a sign as well. This is how all of us should respond to being saved or healed from our sin sickness. Immediately get up and serve. The next few verses describe, after the sun goes down, synagogue is over, news spreads. And people from the surrounding area begin to bring all of their sick, all of their demon-possessed, all of their lame, all of their lepers. And you can just see in this little village of Capernaum, the streets are packed. And though the Bible doesn't describe this, I imagine in my mind Jesus coming out of the house and having a conversation after conversation. He doesn't just want to heal the sickness, he wants to save the soul. And through these conversations, paying attention to each person as if they're the only person in the world. That's just like Jesus. He heals them, and they go dancing off, and a jubilation breaks out. And then the next person, jubilation breaks out, and he goes from person to family, setting things right. And at the end of the night, maybe 2, 3 in the morning, the apostles are finally dog-tired. They go to bed. And Jesus turns around, he looks up the street, and the only thing in the street are bandages, crutches, and cots that are no longer necessary. And he goes off by himself to pray. The next morning, everyone was looking for Jesus, and they're trying to figure out, like, where'd he go? Well, he's praying. Peter finally finds him, and he says, everyone is looking for you. And he said to them, let us go on to the next towns, that I may preach there also. For that's why I came out. And when he went throughout all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons. Jesus has an agenda that's beyond the physical healing of a few people in Capernaum. His agenda is really for all the world to be saved, not merely from their sickness, but from their sin sickness. And we get a glimpse of that from an addition that only Matthew puts in his rendition of this story. He quotes from Isaiah 53, verse 4. He took our illnesses and bore our diseases. Peter will quote the same verse in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 24. What's interesting is Matthew applies it to the physical healing, and Peter applies it to the spiritual healing. Which is right? Both. Of course, God cares about all of us, body, mind, and soul. But ultimately, the greatest healing he offers, which has impact on our psyche, as our mental health, and our physical health, our bodies, it is the soul that he wants to save. And he wants to bring healing to us so that we also could get up and serve others.